Well, at Metropole TVKA across all your social media platforms. My name is Simba Elijah Charles Kiange. We are online across all our social media platforms. Yes, once you're there, a like, a comment will be really good because indeed we are getting into the economic review this morning on this 11th of March 2022 as I'm looking at your entire market performance. But then before that, we look at exactly how we are waking up this morning and bigger headlines that we're covering this morning. Before I introduce the panel that is joining us this morning, we do have the fuel subsidy, which there are fears that it might soon come to an end. We continue this morning. We'll be telling you exactly how the food inflation in the country is totally offset from the average inflation and what can be done, because we've seen hashtags like lower food prices really taking the footholds in the Kenyan economy. We are also going to tell you how higher LPG gas prices are set to hit Kenyans hard. Should have the government done something about it? Those are the questions we're asking this morning, because it looks as if the cost of living in the country continues to rise, even at a time where we know that the general inflation in the country has come down. Again, we were starting at 5.39%. Now we're doing at 5.07%. We'll be telling you why you are not feeling that number in your pocket this morning. Let me take time to introduce the panel that is joining us this morning. We do have Gabriel Mwendwa, who is a chartered financial analyst. Gabriel, good morning, sir. How are you doing?
I'm good, Simba. How have you been?
Fantastic. I'm happy to have you around. We also do have Justin Mwangi, who is an investment analyst. Justin, good morning, sir. Justin, can you confirm you can get me, sir? We shall be getting back to Justin once. Yes, Justin, good morning. Yeah, let's just set up. Then we do also have Melody Ndano, who's an equity research analyst. Melody, good morning.
Good morning, Simba.
Fantastic. We are happy to have you around. Let's get into that conversation this morning. Now, where the Russia-Ukraine crisis has put the fuel subsidy program that has seen Kenyans enjoy cheap fuel prices under threat, with international fuel prices hitting a 14-year high of $139 a barrel. Correction, that came down up to around 112, but then there's that seesaw that we expect to see around that area. There's conviction, therefore, among industry experts that the Treasury will struggle to pay oil marketers more than the 25 billion shillings over the next 2 months, despite a jump in the overall cost of the commodity. Martin Achumba, the chair of Petroleum Outlets Association of Kenya, POAC, indicated that the subsidy will be very expensive if the government opts to maintain it in the new review, as he expressed his doubts if the government will manage. Now, the current fuel being consumed in Kenya is based on the average crude oil prices of $82.03 of a barrel, and the monthly review for next Tuesday at $92 a barrel, with the full impact of the crisis expected to be felt by Kenyans as from April. Currently, the Fuel Stabilization Program gets its funds from the Petroleum Development Levy, that's the PDL, but the Ministry of Petroleum and Mining now indicates that the money it has been spending to keep the prices stable does not match the collections from the levy. Now, last month, in a briefing with the National Assembly Energy Committee, Petroleum and Mining Principal Secretary Andrew Kamau called the program unsustainable. Now, the PS did not, however, indicate the timelines for the current program that has run for the past year, only revealing that over the past 1 year to June 2021, the PDL collected 26.6 billion against the current figure of 19.2 billion, leaving the available balance as of February at only 1.3 billion. As a result of the subsidy, super petrol retails at 129 and 72 cents a litre in Nairobi instead of 144 and 25 cents a litre. Diesel 110 and 60 cents a litre in Nairobi against the actual price of 133 and 89. Kerosene could have retailed at 119 and 42 cents per litre against the current pump prices of 103 and 54 per litre in Nairobi. Let's look at the data set that we have for you this morning, and we're going to go back to last year. Again, those prices have remained unchanged. Looking at the next data set again this morning, you're going to see that indeed this year we're going to have the same one was remained unchanged, with diesel going at around 110 and petrol going at around 129. Let's move on to the next data set that we have for you this morning in terms of that particular commodity, and you will see that indeed excise duty leads across the taxes that then we push into that particular commodity. And if you look at our neighbors in East Africa, then you will say that indeed Kenya is the leading in terms of those taxes in that commodity. Moving on to the last one, you will see BRENT crude trend. It is looking upwards, especially when we got to February and at the onset of the Ukraine-Russia crisis. Fantastic. Let me open the conversation with you, Gabriel, this morning. I mean, conversations of how the government is struggling to retain the fuel subsidy. We do know that this next review is going to be at about $92 a barrel thereof, meaning they have to chuck more money to oil marketers in the country, meaning that what they have right now, what they're collecting, which is 5 shillings for that levy, they have to top up if indeed they're going to manage this fuel subsidy. Now, the CS, Petroleum and Mining, is already calling this program unsustainable. Members in that industry are already saying they feel the government is going to struggle for this levy. Should they let it go?
Thank you, Simba. I think, first of all, we need to remember that the levy itself adds to the price of fuel by 5 shillings,
yes,
if I'm correct. So,
yes.
There's that to also put in the math. Whether the price will be 144, I'm not sure. We've not looked at a breakdown, but
yes,
we need to first factor in that the subsidy itself first adds 5 shillings to the pump price per liter, which is not little. Secondly, how subsidies work is, you start it when the prices are relatively low, so no one is in need of a subsidy. And so let's say the price per liter was 85 shillings and you had another 5 shillings, Kenyan would say fuel at 90 is not expensive.
Yes.
So if they were to experience that 90 for even 2 years or 95, as it gets to 100, no one is feeling the pinch and you have time to accumulate money. So that when it starts hitting the 120, 130s, you already have money you accumulated over 2 years that you can use. Now, I think here was a case of, I don't want to say particularly a good idea, but not a bad idea that came at the very wrong time. Because as we all know, economies globally were recovering. So we were expecting demand for fuel to go up, regardless of the current geopolitical issues we are having in Europe with Russia and Ukrainian conflict, which of course is pushing up the prices much higher. So yes, even despite that, it was not the right time to start the subsidy, because you need to start it when the prices are extremely low so that you can collect enough in that fund so that if you can sustain the subsidy for long enough. Because now if they're saying they've depleted their funds, it's easier then to even take away the subsidy, say you're not collecting the subsidy, and then just expose Kenyans to whatever the price is. If it becomes unbearable, the second option is then to, of course, cut back on the taxes, because we know there's a huge pool of leeway that the government has there in terms of taxes, because over 50% of the final price is taxes.
Yes.
So they still have leeway beyond the subsidy. Of course, the implication of that is far much greater, because then it impacts our revenue collections. fuel being a very key commodity. But if that's how you sort of reduce the cost for every Kenyan evenly, because every Kenyan suffers when fuel prices are up. It's not about those who are driving, about those who are commuting. It's about industry, and it's about every single aspect of our day-to-day life. So they still have leeway outside the subsidy, but just unfortunate timing for the subsidy.
Yes, Gabriel, I'll be coming back to you on that, because also the same ministry is giving us the actual prices that we could be buying this particular commodity if we didn't have the subsidy. I'll be coming to you on that. Let me just confirm whether we have Justin online as well. Justin, do you have us?
Yes, Simba, apologies for the earlier technical issues.
Fantastic, we have you around. All right, Yvonne, I want you to jump onto that data set for the taxes on fuels in the country, because that's exactly where the conversation comes from. The next question for Justin this morning. Again, we're going to start with taxes on fuels. Yvonne, if you could show us that data. Yes, we do have it. On a super petrol, diesel and kerosene, if you look at the taxes on super petrol, we do have it at 21 shillings and 95 cents, and that is only on excise duty. And then if you come to VAT, we have it at 9 shillings and 42 cents. So if you put it together, you do have something like 32 shillings going on taxes on that particular commodity. All right, diesel, 11 shillings and 37 cents. That is on VAT, and you have 7 shillings and 97 cents on excise duty, and VAT is at 7 shillings and 97 cents. Kerosene, 11 shillings and 37 cents on excise duty, and 7 shillings and 25 cents on VAT. Fantastic. Then on top of this, we do have that petroleum development levy that we gotta pay for 5 shillings. So indeed, you are crossing next to half of that particular commodity in terms of taxes and levies. Then the government comes back and tells us that if it were not for this particular levy, then you guys could be buying this commodity at 144 shillings now, if it were not for that levy. Justin, you feel like when you compare ourselves with our neighbors, then taxes on this particular commodity are the highest. Does the government now have a solution? Number one, cut taxes on this particular commodity and then knock out the levy if it's not giving them enough money to cover the cost of this particular commodity.
Thanks, Simba. Maybe just to start,
yes.
I don't think it's ever fair to compare directly country on country in terms of the tax amount that is being paid. However, that said,
yes.
I'm looking at it two ways. The current petroleum development levy, which is meant to stabilize the fuel prices, is unsustainable for sure, because the amount we are collecting is not be able to sustain as long as the fuel prices keep increasing.
Yes.
So what will happen is that there will be a deficit. Money will be needed from elsewhere. How will the government raise this deficit? It's through some sort of tax intervention, increasing taxes elsewhere, or you sacrifice a bit of expenditure elsewhere, especially along development budgets. So already in that way we are losing. We may enjoy the stable fuel prices, but we'll be losing from elsewhere, either higher taxes or less development. So then you try to think of an alternative, especially short term, because long term alternatives are always so many. You always look at finding the increasing results in the future, etc. But if you look at the short term, I think the government should try and look at the taxes, as you're saying, that is being charged on fuel imports, or fuel and crude oil imports. For sure, by reducing that levy or removing it altogether, like we saw Tanzania, I think in January, remove their petroleum levy altogether.
Yes.
That already goes towards reducing the price of fuel. Then if the government looks at the excise duty percentage that it is taxing fuel importers, then we might see that it can let go of the subsidy and still intervene in a different way, reducing taxes in order for the fuel prices not to go too high, so that Kenyans are suffering.
Yes. Fantastic. Justin, I'll be coming back to you on that, on exactly what then would be the actual price. Because indeed, if you look at the taxation vis-a-vis what the subsidy is doing right now, it's been really shelving Kenyans heavily. Melody, let me bring you into this conversation. If you look at where we are right now, the 129, the 110, even when Justin says, indeed, we should not compare what we are charging here vis-a-vis what our neighbors are charging, it makes Kenya now the cheapest country in East Africa for you to fuel using diesel. If you go back, you'll find that our neighbors used to be cheaper than Kenya. Then we were arguing it from an economic perspective on exactly why that particular commodity is like that. Melody, can we afford to do away with this subsidy?
Yes, Simba, thank you for the question. So for me, I believe at the moment, the government shouldn't do away with it, though we know that it's still under pressure to get additional funds.
Yes.
Households are still reeling from the effects of the pandemic. The cost of living is on an upward trend. So I believe if they remove this cushion, it's going to devastate our households because, as Gabriel had said, fuel affects all aspects of our lives. If it goes up, manufacturers will raise their costs and then now it will be passed on to consumers. So in our opinion, the subsidy can be removed like once there's a proper pricing mechanism,
yes,
as it's been reviewed properly, and as well as the proposed tax revisions that Justin had said. Also, we know that fuel prices, it's an emotive subject, especially now at a time during the election period. So if the government is to lift it, there might be some uproar. We saw in September, people really complained when the subsidy was lifted. So I believe at the moment, if the government can get additional funding just to support people at the moment, because the economy, yes, it's showing signs of improvement, but the cost of living as well is going through the roof.
Yes, pretty much. Now, Gabriel, let's look at then what the Treasury is saying, that if it were not for this particular subsidy, then we could be buying this particular commodity at very high prices. Let me particularly go to the two. For petrol, it could be 143, 144 thereof before the next review, which we do know is going to be higher. So 150, 150 something, not very far away. Same thing to diesel. The actual price right now could be around 130 something. With the next review in just 3 days to come, we could be getting it even a bit higher. Could be 140, 135 upwards. Fine. This school of thought, Gabriel, that says reduce taxation on a particular commodity, you get more on it. Is that what the government is afraid to do? That if you reduce then the taxes on this commodity, majority of Kenyans would use this particular commodity, then indeed what you'll be doing is that you'll be cancelling out what you're losing out by taxing it even further. Is that now the only option that the Treasury that this particular ministry has? Because indeed, we do know some of them in our office, they are afraid to come back and tell Kenyans, as from next week or next month, it's going to be 150, it's going to be 140, it's going to be 130.
So, so it doesn't work one for one for fuel, whereby if you reduce the cost, consumption increases. It doesn't work one for one, because remember, for you to get to work, Simba, whether you like it or not, you have to use a locomotive of one sort or the other.
Yes.
Factories that use diesel, whether they like it or not, they have to use that form of diesel. Power generators who use diesel, they have to. So there's no much of an option. So that impact of reducing up the price for this kind of commodities, I'm forgetting the exact name of this kind of commodities, reducing the price or even increasing the price has marginal impact on consumption. So fuel falls in that category. So really, that's not the math or how the government would be looking at it. But how probably they will look at it is, instead of reducing these taxes, because to reduce any of these taxes that are currently in the pricing formula, you have to go through parliament, and there's a whole process to it.
Yes.
So if I was government, what I would do is I would still, even if the subsidy fund has run out of money, as Treasury, I would capitalize it, because I'm still collecting taxes on the fuel. So instead of reducing the tax on the fuel by changing regulation, which I don't want to do because good times might come and I want to collect taxes, you just collect the taxes, the levies that are currently on the fuel, and then put them in the subsidy fund. And that way you're still able to sort of stabilize the fuel price.
Yes.
Now, the other way we need to look at it is if we actually did have this fund, the price increase would have been gradual. It would not have been 100 to 144 to whatever in just like that.
Yes.
It would have been gradual. And when something is gradual, as much as there's a pinch, people are able to sort of plan for it.
Yes.
Now that, you've kept it low artificially, then if there's a jump, if you do not continue doing it, then you're going to expose people to a very sudden 1 month jump in prices. And I think that's the situation they're in. We've stabilized it instead of letting it grow or decline gradually as it has done in the past. We've now affected that trend. It's no longer a steady trend. We managed it. So now what do? We still have to find a way to keep doing it. So They have to keep doing it, but I think that's how they'll do it. Collect taxes and then use that money to still fund the subsidy fund.
Pretty much. But just before we run out of this topic, Justine, I want you to take a minute and, we when it comes to looking at how our neighbors are pricing this particular commodity, why would it not be okay for us to look around? Because Justine, as it stands, there was a time last year where all those who were living close to the borders of the East African countries, they were looking elsewhere to fuel their cars and actually go buy for this commodity because like on like, it was cheaper for them to do that. Can we take the morals of our neighbors and then say, well, it's going to be like that across the board? Because they seem like they have managed that issue pretty well than we are doing it.
Yeah, I think the difference is on the import duty element.
Yes.
And the excise duty, of course. Because if you look at, for example, oil going to Uganda, a huge chunk of it passes through Kenya, but it's exempt from our import duty regime. It's exposed only to the Ugandan one. So going forward, first, I agree with my fellow panelists. The subsidy for sure is not sustainable, but it can't be done away at once. In terms of the tax regime, then it's up to us. Now, the impetus is on us, the Kenyan government, to relook at how best it can reduce the taxation the tax that is applied on fuel. Remember, the reason why they always rely on fuel to raise a lot of their revenues because everyone uses it. As Gabriel said, it's unavoidable. So it's for them to relook at how they can reduce it over time. If it's reducing the levy from 5.4 to the 0.4 that was there earlier on, or it's relooking at the percentage of excise duty. And that probably has to be done in the next fiscal year because at this point, it's very hard to do anything between now and the election, and June.
Pretty much. Fantastic. Let's move on from that issue and usher in a melody in the next one where Kenyan inflation slowed for the fourth consecutive month in January since November 2021, reaching an 8-month low as food prices have increased at a higher rate. Now, the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics Monthly Consumer Price Index released on January 31st shows that Kenya's overall inflation rate stood at 5.39%. Now, this output is a decline from the high of 6.91% in September 2021 and a marginal year-on-year decline from 5.69% recorded in January 2021. Now, for majority of Kenyans, these are just not numbers on paper. It is painful reality for them. And in true Kenyan fashion, they have taken to social media to protest the rising cost of food and groceries. Under the hashtag lower food prices, citizens have decried the increase in prices of basic food commodities such as sifted maize flour, bread, vegetable and fruits. This even as millers are warning Kenyans that the current flour prices are set to jump even further as the ongoing war in Eastern Europe forced Ukraine to introduce export quotas on weekdays after Russia temporarily banned shipping out the commodity. Now, Kenya relies on wheat imports from Ukraine and Russia, and the two countries are currently at war following Moscow's invasion of the Western neighbor. In January 2019, Kenya's food inflation declined to 3.4% 2.51%, while in 2020 and 2021, it decelerated to 2.52 and 2.36 same period respectively. Now, the rate has been decreasing since reaching a peak at 15.67% to 10% in the first quarter and part of the second of 2021 and 2020. Another issue, the cost of fertilizers and other agricultural inputs has skyrocketed in the last year alone, some noting an increase as high as 200%. Now, this hike has no doubt contributed to the high food prices in the country as farmers are forced to pass on the cost to consumers. Let's leave it there. Melody, question is going to be that when you're saying that the average inflation for the month of February will be around 5.09%, and then we celebrate that figure, and then on the sidelines of that, you say that food inflation is on a high. It's more than 10%. It's double that digit for the average inflation for that particular month. How do you reconcile that? Do we, as I would say normal citizens, have to say there's something wrong that need to be corrected, or that is a normal inflation figure?
So I would say that the inflation has mainly been affected by, you saw that the electricity reforms, there was the reduction by about 15%.
Yes.
So that brought down the cost of electricity a bit. However, the food inflation is going to, for me, I think it's going to keep going up in the short term. We've seen that the rains have not been as good as they're supposed to be. We've seen now the conflict situation with Russia and Ukraine. We import wheat from them. And then we've seen that additionally, the economy, or rather the global economy, has been recovering from the COVID-19 pandemic. Already
Yes.
there were issues of supply chain constraints, shortages, and rising commodity prices. So I think in the coming months, we're going to see some more inflationary pressure, especially due to the food inflation. For the electricity, right now, it's being artificially managed by the government due to the reduction of the tariffs. But if you come back to look at it, actually, if Kenya Power is struggling, the government will still come back to us to raise money to support the company. So yes, it's maintaining the energy prices, but it has to do more just to look at how the systems are running, so that it's something that's long term. So basically that's it. I believe that inflationary pressure is going to continue. We've seen the semiconductor shortages as well. That's going to affect electronic appliances as well. And we're just going to have to unfortunately deal with the inflation as it comes. Maybe the central bank will put in place its second round measures of how to deal with inflation.
Pretty much. Melody, just before I let you go on that as well, I mean, when you look at the rise in some commodities in the country, and Yvonne, if you could also show me the price, the price of LPG as well, and also run that data alongside Brent crude prices, which we expect are also going to raise the price of commodities in the country as well. We are technically in runaway inflation. Would you say that at this point, Melody, that indeed we could be seeing some action then to just stop this runaway inflation that we have seen now in the country?
I'd say the only way that maybe the government can come and step up in this runaway inflation is now to just introduce subsidies as a short-term stopgap for the running away of the inflation.
Yes.
We haven't reached the capacity of saying that we're in hyperinflation just yet. That's what happened to countries like Zimbabwe and South Sudan, really due to the civil war.
Yes.
So that usually sees inflations of up to 1,000% per annum. So we're not there yet, but the inflation is going to keep going up in the short term. So the only way that the government can help in the meantime is to introduce government subsidies, like maybe on fertilizer.
Yes.
We know that Russia is like one of the leading producers of the chemicals that are used for manufacturing fertilizer. So if the government can put in place such measures, it can help in the short term.
Pretty much. Gabriel, let's talk about that, because when you look at the things that are hitting us left, right, and center, number one, you will look at crude prices. We're talking about the price of oil, which we have no control over. When it goes up, it goes up. We have no say. There's nothing we can do about it other than just sit back and wait for international oil prices to correct. Another one, fertilizers, which we have no say. We have nothing about it. I mean, we wait for the prices to go up. We have to shield it or find ways to get government subsidy on it. But if you look at what the CS was saying last week, it said that only time these prices will come down is all the way in August. Fine. Then another one, flour prices. I mean, we are net importers of this particular commodity. We have nothing. When it comes, we have nothing that we can do and just pray that Russia and Ukraine get into some sort of truce. Fine. Another one again that is hitting us left, right, and center is crude palm oil, which, as you know now, buying a liter of cooking oil is actually twice or thrice expensive as buying a liter of petrol. When I look at it, or anybody looking at it, this is pretty much imported inflation. Can the government do something about it in the short term? And in what sort of form is it going to appear? Fantastic. Yes.
Okay. I doubt they can do much.
Yes.
Because the problem is they don't have the resources to do it. Because remember, to reduce those prices or cut back on those prices, then you're meaning giving up tax revenue, which we're very much in need of at this point in time. In fact, if you read the news there, I think they just added another cess charge to wheat as it's delivered to millers. So that's another tax yet they're just adding in the midst of all this crisis. So I think the only way we can protect ourselves is reaching out to within the East African region and mapping out what each country can actually produce that the other country needs, and actually coming up with a commodity trading agreement, because that's the only way then we can shield ourselves.
Yes.
Because I think now it's Egypt which has already banned the sale of food commodities outside the country. China did it a long time ago. I think they foresaw that coming. So that's where we're headed, where countries first of all ensure that sort of you control what is actually consumed locally. So if we need to import wheat, you tell people now you have to eat maize flour, which is what we have here.
Yes.
So it's just going to be a change in consumption habits driven by prices.
Yes.
And that's, I think, the only thing the government can do. Make sure that whatever is regionally available is easy to move across our 3-4 neighbors who we trade closely with. But things like cooking oil, there's no choice. But we have a lot of sunflower oil in actually Uganda. So that would be something we need to maybe look into and tell Uganda, do you want to double, triple your processing? Because Uganda has a lot of that. So those are some of the factors that we need to then start looking into. But like I said, there's no short-term, medium-term solution to this, and we're going to continue being hit by the prices. And as we go deeper into the crisis, that's the only way then the pressure can mount on the likes of Russia and Ukraine to sort of ease off the tension.
Pretty much. Justin, I would like us to go for a tiny little break. Once we come back, I mean, it's not like we've not seen 15%. 15.97% in food inflation. We have hit those figures before, but this time around, it looks as if we are fighting a lot. I mean, we still within the COVID-19 pandemic. That's when our economy is still recovering. And then after that now, if you look at the government response, even in the areas that then would bring this inflation down, they've not done anything. I mean, the other day, KRA just announced that they're also going to introduce cess into cereals that are brought into the country as well, meaning the prices are still going to continue to go far, and the CS Agriculture is saying, well, we have nothing to do. We have to wait until August for the prices of fertilizers to come down as well. Question is going to be, in what form can we start acting right now. You hear Gabriel is saying, right now is the time to look regionally. If there's something available, we need to start looking at those options now. But can the government start with subsidies? Because this looks as if it's proper, in black and white terms, runaway inflation. And somebody somewhere is not doing something about it. Once we come back here on a Business AM, you can actually get to join us online at Metropole TV KE across all your social media platforms. #Business AM.